3 hours after the divorce, my former mother-in-law, Linda, was standing at my door. She had a small white envelope in her hand, and she was smiling like she wasn't there to take my house, but something that already belonged to her. She thought I would hand over the keys because I was afraid. She had no idea that a file hidden inside my father's locked study, with her own signatures on it, was about to be opened against the entire empire her family had built. My name is Emma Collins. I am 42 years old and I live in a small suburb called Dublin, Ohio. The house where Linda was standing at my door was the house my father left for me. 3 hours earlier, I had been inside that same house putting away the final papers from my marriage. Now, to my former mother-in-law, it was just another thing she wanted to take from me. My divorce from Brian did not take long. Everything happened quietly at the courthouse. There were no arguments, no dramatic scenes. The judge reviewed the documents, we both signed the papers, and a few minutes later we became strangers. Before leaving, Brian only said one thing. "Emma, I hope you understand that this is what's best for us." I looked at him. The same man I had spent 16 years with was standing there, putting his phone back into his pocket like he was leaving a business meeting. I didn't answer, because at that moment I had too much to say. But I knew some things are not proven by words. They are proven by time. When I returned home, my morning coffee was still sitting in the kitchen. There was a brown mark around the edge of the cup. I picked it up, placed it in the sink, and stood there quietly for a while. This was the same house where we had put up our first Christmas tree. The same house where my son Noah learned how to ride his bike. The same house where my father, David, had sat with me for the last time. My father had been gone for 2 years. After he passed away, I never opened his study. I kept the door closed because everything inside reminded me of him. The wooden desk, the old clock, the bookshelves, and the leather chair where he used to sit in the evenings and read the newspaper. After the divorce, I only knew one thing. I needed some time alone. But Linda was not willing to give me any time. At around 5:30 that evening, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Linda was standing there. Brian was standing beside her. Linda looked inside the house. "We need the keys," she said. I kept my hand on the door handle. "Which keys?" She took a small breath like I was a child making things unnecessarily difficult. "Emma, you shouldn't be staying in this house anymore. Brian and I talked about it. You know how family property matters work." I looked at Brian. He wouldn't look me in the eyes. That was the first moment I clearly understood that this wasn't something that had happened suddenly. This had been planned. Linda held out the envelope. "These are some papers. Just sign them and everything will be easier." I didn't take the envelope. "I'm not signing anything." The smile disappeared from her face. "Do you really want to make this difficult?" I only said, "You can leave." Brian spoke softly. "Emma, don't be stubborn." I closed the door. That night I couldn't sleep. But I wasn't crying either. I was just sitting there thinking about all the things I had ignored during 16 years of marriage because I thought they were normal. Brian had never seemed like a bad person in the beginning. That was the hardest part. He wasn't someone who screamed or lost his temper. He changed things quietly. The first few years of our marriage were good. We bought a small house, Noah was born, and we lived a simple life like everyone else. Then Linda started becoming more involved. She had an opinion about every decision. Brian should have a bigger share in the company. "Emma, you don't understand how these things work. Family assets should stay within the family." Most of the time I stayed quiet. I thought maybe I was being too sensitive. But the small things kept adding up. One Thanksgiving dinner, Linda said in front of everyone, "Emma is a good girl, but she doesn't understand business the way Brian does." Everyone laughed. I laughed too. Now when I think about it, I know it wasn't just a joke. It was a message. Brian's father had started a construction company years ago. The company was called Collins Development Group. Brian worked there, but he never had complete control. Linda always said that one day everything would belong to Brian. Maybe that was why she expected a certain kind of loyalty from me too. When my father was sick, he told me something once. "Emma, people often underestimate paperwork. But when things get difficult, documents are what reveal the truth." At the time I didn't think much about it. But my father was always prepared. The morning after the divorce, I decided to open his study. When I unlocked the door, the smell of old wood and paper filled the room. Everything was exactly the way he had left it. There was a small envelope sitting on the desk. My name was written on it. "For Emma, when you feel like you have to stand up for what is yours." My hands stopped moving. Inside were several pages. A copy of my father's will, legal documents, and an agreement. I started reading. Years earlier, my father had invested in Brian's family business. He had provided a large amount of money to help Collins Development Group expand. But there was a condition. If certain parts of the agreement were violated, specific company assets and shares would be transferred back. I kept turning the pages. Then I found the thing that changed everything. Linda's signature. Brian's signature. The agreement they had signed clearly stated that company financial records, assets, and family shares could not be used for personal benefit. And I knew exactly what they had done. In the months before my divorce, Brian had transferred some company assets into his mother's name. They believed my father's old agreement no longer mattered. But they forgot one thing. My father kept copies of everything. I immediately called my father's old attorney, Mark Harris. He still lived in the same city. He listened to everything I said and asked only one question. Do you have the original documents? I said, yes. He replied, then you have the one thing they fear the most. The next few days were quiet. I didn't tell anyone what I had found. Not Brian. Not Linda. I only organized the documents. Mark reviewed the company records. Then the bank transactions. Then the transfers Brian had tried to hide. The problem was not just that they wanted to remove me from my own home. They had violated the company agreements. And they were convinced nobody could stop them. 2 weeks later, Collins Development Group held a board meeting. I was invited. When I walked in, Brian looked surprised. Why are you here? I pulled out a chair and sat down. Because I have documents that need to be discussed. Linda was there too. She looked as confident as ever. But when Mark placed the file on the table, the expression on her face changed. One page after another was placed in front of everyone. Dates. Signatures. Numbers. Transfers. Nobody shouted. There was only silence. The same silence that once hurt me. This time it worked in my favor. The board members started asking questions. Brian had fewer and fewer answers. Finally, Linda looked at me. You did this. I looked at her. No. You did. I only found what you left behind. Within weeks, control of the company changed. Brian was removed from his position while the investigation continued. Linda was also separated from company decisions. And most importantly, the house where she had come to take my keys was legally mine. That night when I stood at my front door again, I was holding the same keys. But this time I wasn't trying to protect something from someone else. I was simply locking my own door. Noah started living with me. We planted a new tree in the backyard. The old one had fallen during a storm, but the house was still standing. Sometimes I think about Brian. Not the man who stood across from me in court. But the man who once ate pizza with me at night and talked about our future. They were not the same person. 3 hours after the divorce, Linda came to my house because she believed I would break. She didn't know I had already decided to stay quiet. And sometimes the person who stays quiet is the one who is the most prepared. If this story touched you or made you think about the choices people make, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe for more powerful stories. Your support means a lot and helps us continue sharing these emotional journeys. Thank you for watching, and I truly appreciate you being here with us today.